A girl looks out the window thinking to herself as the warm afternoon light filters through the glass panes, casting gentle shadows across her face while she contemplates the peaceful garden view before her. She hears something behind her, so she looks back, and it was young master approaching her with careful steps. She calls him out with a gentle voice and saw him holding flowers in his hands, their petals still fresh with morning dew. It's Jeremy Rosinante, the heir to the grand estate. He is the mastermind of this novel and the young master she serves with unwavering loyalty and dedication. Jeremy hands out the flower, telling her this is for her, while his eyes show a warmth she hasn't seen before. The woman asks why is he suddenly giving her flowers with such genuine surprise in her voice, unable to hide her confusion at this unexpected gesture. Jeremy says it's a gift with a soft smile playing on his lips. It's like a carnation as a token for his gratitude for all the care she has shown him throughout the years. The woman says thank you very much, young master, while accepting the beautiful flowers with trembling hands. She's not used to this grown-up demeanor from someone she has watched grow from childhood. Just a few months ago, the young master, whose cheeks were so round and adorable she could almost eat him up, running around the estate with childlike wonder. Now, no matter how she looks at him, he's a grown man with broad shoulders and a mature bearing that commands respect. The woman notices the bruises on his hand and was baffled by the sight of the dark marks against his pale skin. She asks what happened to his hand while holding it gently, examining the wounds with growing concern. Jeremy says he removed all the thorns so she wouldn't get hurt while picking the flowers from the garden. The woman asks with his bare hands in disbelief, her voice rising with worry and concern. Goodness, young master, seriously, she thinks to herself about his reckless behavior. Jeremy asks Haley if he did something wrong again, with uncertainty clouding his features. Haley says yes with firmness in her voice. His body is more important than hers, so please be careful not to get hurt from now on. Understood, she says while looking directly into his eyes. She bandages his hand with gentle care, wrapping the cloth around his fingers with practiced movements. Jeremy asks if that's all while looking at her with expectation. Haley was confused and Jeremy says she made a promise, didn't she, with a slight smile. Haley asks a promise with genuine puzzlement in her voice. Jeremy says if he did something wrong, she said she'd give him a spanking like she used to when he was younger. Haley was frozen but then exclaims yes in confusion, her face turning red with embarrassment. The scene cuts to Haley saying the day was a very pleasant sunny day with white clouds drifting lazily across the blue sky. In her last memory of her past life, everything seemed ordinary and unremarkable. She was at the department store where she worked, serving customers with a tired smile. Haley says she'll apply the points for her while working at the register. She thinks to herself that it had been exactly 3 months since she ran away from her toxic family situation. A woman grabs her by her hair and screams at her that she finally found her after searching everywhere. Haley exclaims in pain, and the woman says she thinks she can escape alone and have a good time while avoiding her responsibilities. Who's going to pay the overdue card bill that keeps piling up? If she doesn't transfer the money soon, she won't be able to do her beloved shooting hobby that brings her joy. Haley exclaims that she will break those fingers and shoves her to the ground while screaming let go of her hair. A man says, "Sis, it's payday today, right?" with a greedy look in his eyes. Instead of running away, let's help each other and live together like before. They're family after all, bound by blood ties. Haley's body immediately just drops as she thinks to herself that she just lost all her strength from the overwhelming stress. A voice is heard saying Haley starting today she'll be in charge of the second young master with authority. Haley thinks to herself, what did she just say, with complete bewilderment. The maid says if the young master acts suspiciously, report it immediately to the head of the household. Haley thinks to herself, what is this situation she finds herself in? As she stays quiet, she realizes it's a reincarnation through possession in a popular romance fantasy novel she once read. Haley looks at herself in a mirror and says it seems that she has ended up doing it too, joining the ranks of transmigrated souls. The maid tells her to take it while handing her something important. Haley thinks to herself if that is money she's being given. The maid says no matter what happens, don't panic about the situation. She believes that she's tight-lipped and can be trusted with secrets. Haley nods in confusion and says yes, head maid, while trying to process everything. She thinks to herself that she can clearly feel the memories of this body's original master flowing through her mind. Even in this strange situation, her body has already gotten used to it like it belongs here. This place is certainly new to her consciousness, but she knows it very well through inherited memories. She closes the door after herself and thinks to herself that's right, she remembered what kind of novel it was now. The protagonist who falls into darkness protects the heroine no matter where they are. The novel's name was How to Save the Duke. and she has reincarnated as a supporting character in that novel, the villain who causes trouble. Haley Tort, a name that carries weight in this world. Right now she's using a pendant to hide her true form and torment the protagonist for reasons she doesn't fully understand, but Haley trembles and asks herself what should she do now in this predicament. She puts her hand on her face, asking herself if this is really happening to her. A princess, you say? It's truly a complete turnaround in life from her previous existence. Haley thinks to herself, so what if she's the villain in this story? Being a princess means she's rich, right, with access to wealth beyond her wildest dreams. From the moment she reincarnated, she's no longer the stupid Haley who was trapped by family obligations. If she lives quietly without tormenting the mastermind of the story, she can escape from the debts of her parents and her younger brother's student loan, what she suffered from for so long. The blood ties she thought she could never escape from in her previous life. The whole family who were desperate to suck her money dry like parasites. Haley holds her fist and thinks to herself, this means she can say goodbye to all of that and start her life as a princess with unlimited possibilities. She won't find a chance this good anywhere else in any lifetime. Haley's eyes open wide and she thinks to herself that's right, but then reality hits her. The ground trembled and strange cries echoed from all around the estate. She remembered the ending of this novel's destruction that awaits everyone. The ground trembled and strange cries echoed from all around as the world began to crumble. However, he hesitated at first due to the heroine, the saintess, opposing him with her pure heart. But his lifelong desire for revenge consumed him completely. In the end, he goes on a rampage that destroys everything. A woman says she's sorry Jeremy, her voice filled with regret. It's all her fault for not saving him sooner. And so with the world's destruction, the story comes to an end with no survivors. Haley says that even though she's a cheat character who can't be beaten, why is she so caught up in the past with its painful memories? With the grudges of the past and the rampage of power, in the end everyone perishes without exception. Even if she lived quietly without getting involved with the protagonist, if the world is destroyed it's all the same, right, making her efforts meaningless. She was born a princess and yet the world ends and that's the end of it all? Honestly, she's so unlucky to be in this situation. This is not a problem that will resolve itself if left alone to fester. If that's the case, then first, she must take action. She has no choice but to destroy this family's cycle of destruction. The Rosinante Marquis family stands as one of the most powerful noble houses in the empire. The place where Jeremy was kidnapped when he was born, snatched away from his rightful home and family, and the family that would later become the cause of his rampage against the world. On top of that, the Empress, who uses the Rosinante name as a shield for her own political machinations, ends up treating Haley rashly in countless humiliating ways. In many ways, this is a family she must erase as well from existence to prevent the destruction that awaits. Haley cleans the window with slow, deliberate movements and thinks to herself that for that goal, she must definitely bring Jeremy to her side as an ally. Even if she becomes a princess right away with all the wealth and status that comes with it, she won't be able to bring down such a stable Marquis family alone, without any backing or support from powerful allies. But what if Jeremy shares the same goal too, seeking revenge against those who wronged him? Then it would be a completely different story with endless possibilities for success. With 3 months left until the beginning of the original story's timeline, everything hangs in the balance. It's hard to predict what will happen from here on out with so many variables at play. Either way, she must find what she can do now and take action before it's too late to change anything. Haley looks at herself in the glass reflection and smiles to herself with newfound determination and thinks to herself, alright, let's give it a try and see what fate has in store. Haley screams no with sudden panic in her voice. The soldier asks what's wrong all of a sudden with concern written across his withered face. Haley chuckles nervously and thinks to herself they were putting drugs in every meal Jeremy has to brainwash him into submission. Haley tells the chief she'll mix the drugs into the tea from now on with feigned enthusiasm. Haley thinks to herself of course she won't actually mix it into anything he consumes. On top of that cruel treatment, they isolated him on the top floor of the dark and gloomy annex building. Not only did they assign knights to monitor him constantly, but they also kept a 24-hour watch over his every movement. The soldier grabs the food as Haley screams at him that he shouldn't eat it with urgency in her voice. The worker gets startled and asks why not with confusion and disappointment. She thinks to herself, why is he even touching the food that's meant for Jeremy? He saw those fingers go into his mouth. No way she can let that continue. Haley says the young master has been leading soup lately, so she decided to mix the medicine into the meat instead. The worker says, is that so, with understanding dawning on his face? The worker says, well, he guesses today he'll stop stealing meals. It was fun while it lasted, though, with a hint of sadness. Haley gets pissed off from the inside but smiles from the outside and says "heh" with false cheerfulness. She opens the door and sighs, thinking to herself, why is it so dark in here even though it's midday outside? She opens the curtains and thinks to herself, what is this mess before her eyes? It's like a junkyard with debris and neglect everywhere she looks. Even a healthy person would fall sick if they lived here in such terrible conditions. She sighs to herself and asks herself, how is he managing to live in such an environment without losing his sanity? Haley calls out young master and asks where is he in this maze of neglect. She has brought him his meal as requested by the household staff. Young master, she calls again with growing concern. She notices him in the tub and she sprints towards him while asking if he's okay, with worry flooding her voice. She thinks to herself and says, wait a minute, trying to process the situation. The person she will serve from now on, it's an adult novel, so she won't be surprised if anything started at any time between characters. She thinks to herself, is this the thrill of reincarnation she's been hearing about? Haley says young master with urgency. And a man wakes up and Haley thinks to herself, unfortunately he was just a maid doing his duties. Haley asks if he's alright with genuine concern for his well-being. The maid asks where is he with disorientation clouding his vision. Haley says he's at the second master's bathroom trying to help him understand. A huge scream is let out and the maid screams really with shock and horror. What was he thinking when he accepted this assignment? He accepted cleaning because he needed the money to support his family. Haley, all startled, asks what happened here to cause such distress. The maid says, well, it's the young master's curse that affects everyone around him. He sobs and says no before that terrible thing happens. If she's done here, she'd better leave quickly before something bad occurs. The maid sprints off saying he will excuse himself from this cursed place. Haley was confused and thinks to herself, what was that strange encounter about? Haley goes on by saying, where's the young master in all this chaos? She notices a poke at the back of her back from behind. A voice is heard asking who she is with suspicion and wariness. Haley thinks to herself, the main character of the story? She thinks to herself to calm down for now and not panic. Haley says, are you the young master, with polite formality? She brought him his meal as instructed by the household. Jeremy says if she brought his meal she should just quietly leave it and go away. Why is she still here in his room bothering him? Haley startles and says that she was going to greet the young master properly as is customary. Jeremy's eyes light up with curiosity as Haley goes on by saying that from today onwards she's in charge of serving the young master exclusively. Jeremy asks in charge with surprise in his voice and confusion on his face. Haley tells herself to not get scared, just calm down and handle this professionally. Haley says she's his personal maid assigned specifically to his care, but then looks down and was flabbergasted by what she sees. Jeremy was standing in front of her and blushing with embarrassment as Haley calls him out by saying young master with shock and disbelief. Haley says his name in confusion and says young master Jeremy with uncertainty clouding her voice. Jeremy was nervous and fidgeting with his hands as Haley falls in love with his cuteness, and she asks herself, what is this overwhelming feeling? He's so cute with his small frame and innocent features. Haley thinks to herself, that's right, she had completely forgotten before he fell into darkness. Jeremy was frozen in growth and appeared as a 5-year-old child trapped in time. Haley starts tearing up, thinking to herself she's sorry for thinking such strange things about someone she's supposed to serve. She never imagined he'd be this cute with such adorable mannerisms. Haley gets down on her knees and says Abakama with reverence and affection. Jeremy asks what is it with curiosity in his young voice. Haley says she has just one request that might sound strange. Could she touch his cheek just once to confirm this isn't a dream? Jeremy is said to have been cursed with a spell that prevents him from growing beyond the body of a 5-year-old according to the rumors. The maid nervously says to each other that come on, she should go before something terrible happens. The other maid says she doesn't want to with fear in her trembling voice. Isn't he cursed with dark magic that brings misfortune? Haley says to herself of course it was not an actual curse cast by any witch or sorcerer. It's just a play staged by the Marquis who spread a false oracle with a huge donation to corrupt priests. The reincarnation of the god of destruction will be born from a red snake according to the fabricated prophecy. The child who inherited the power of Terrasthan, the first duke who ruled with absolute authority. Jeremy was born with the power to literally destroy everything in his path when fully awakened. The power to reign at the top of this world with unmatched strength and influence. The Marquis of Rosinante who sought that power kidnapped Jeremy as soon as he was born into this world. He locked him in a basement from the time he was 5 and began to slowly steal his power through dark rituals. Eventually, due to the forced extraction of his power at such a young age, Jeremy's growth stopped completely. So he turned Jeremy into someone cursed in the eyes of everyone around him. Jeremy was very startled and Haley says such an adorable child with genuine warmth in her voice. Jeremy nervously asks what is she saying with embarrassment coloring his pale cheeks. Go away from here right now. Haley thinks to herself these fluffy cheeks that shine in the sunlight streaming through the window. It's just too cute for words to describe. Haley tells him to please enjoy his meal while she watches over him. Jeremy all judgmental asks today it's not half-eaten like usual? Haley asks half-eaten with confusion and then remembers those guys and gets pissed off at their behavior. Haley says there were some rats and mice in the kitchen, she took care of them permanently. She won't serve anything half-eaten from now on, so please rest assured and eat before the food gets cold. Jeremy glances at her with suspicious eyes but then nervously starts eating and asks how long does she plan to stay here? Haley says please don't mind her presence at all. She brought him a lemonade and Jeremy stares at it with wonder. He asks why is she being kind to him when no one else ever has. Why is she being kind to a cursed monster that everyone fears? Haley's heart dropped and silence erupts throughout the room like a heavy blanket. Haley asks a cursed monster with disbelief in her voice. Is he referring to himself, young master, in such harsh terms? She has never seen such a cute monster before in any tale. Which mythology does it come from that describes monsters so adorable? Jeremy gets pissed off and says what with anger flashing in his eyes. Is she mocking him and his situation? Haley says no, of course not with sincerity. She smiles and says she's happy that the young master is not a monster at all. It seems like she can work here for a long time without any problems. Jeremy says so with uncertainty, but then freezes as something changes in the atmosphere. The room gets gloomy and dark clouds seem to gather overhead and Haley questions young master with growing concern. He drops to the floor and Haley reaches out for him exclaiming if he's okay while panic fills her voice. Haley realizes this is a rampage that she's read about in the novel. A change that appears due to an extreme state of excitement caused by the rampant power flowing through his veins. The only one who can save him from this state is the Saintess according to the original story. Jeremy yells at her to get out while his power swirls around dangerously. Haley thinks to herself but he's suffering so much she should at least help a little bit. Haley grabs the book floating in the air and she yells out young master with determination. Please take a deep breath to calm yourself. If he takes a big breath it will get better she knows. Jeremy takes a deep breath and Haley says that's it perfectly. Now, slowly exhale and let the tension leave your body. She goes on by telling him to take another deep breath and focus on her voice. Jeremy slowly calms down and Haley thinks to herself alright with relief. It's starting to calm down gradually. The worker opens the door yelling out hey, Maid with urgency and fear. Haley says oh no as the disturbance threatens their progress. Jeremy starts suffering more from the sudden interruption. The worker tells her to close the door immediately. She should leave right now before it gets worse. A book is thrown towards him and the soldier gets startled by the flying object. The soldier tells the other soldier to hurry up and close it before anyone gets hurt. Haley gets pissed off and tells them to remember this, you irresponsible fools who don't understand. A sword is thrown towards her which nearly misses her and cuts her hair off cleanly. Haley was frozen and says her hair with shock and dismay. A book is thrown on her head and Haley gets really hurt and tells young master to please stop this violence. She reaches for him as Jeremy looks at her with tormented eyes. Haley grabs his hand and says please stop, master. She drops to the ground exhausted. Haley opens her eyes and says it hurts with a sharp pain shooting through her skull. Where is this unfamiliar place she finds herself in? A dark and damp space surrounds her like a tomb. The same unpleasant feeling she had when she first transmigrated into this world washes over her. Could this be the afterlife that she's heard stories about? A voice is heard saying what a weak guy passing out so easily from such a minor incident. Haley turns around asking if there's someone here in this darkness with her. The voice says he has been rampaging everywhere without any restraint or consideration for others. Haven't they taught him not to behave like this in civilized society? Haley thinks to herself, is this prison where dangerous criminals are kept? The man asks if he should splash some ice water on him to wake him up immediately. The man says waking him up would only provoke him further and make the situation worse. Haley thinks to herself, and the one that collapsed over there is someone she recognizes. A man walks in saying, well, it's actually convenient that he's unconscious right now. This one, when he's in his true form, unleashes the highest quality of power that can be harvested. A spell is used and the guy lying on the floor starts yelling in pain and agony. Haley gasps and says, what is that terrible procedure they're performing? The man says that's right with satisfaction in his voice. Give him more of that high-quality power that flows through his veins. The man's eyes open wide and Haley was startled and asks Jeremy with recognition and horror, Haley wakes up in a bed and she thinks to herself she feels like she was dreaming something terrible. Haley wakes up suddenly and says that's right, her hair that was cut during the incident. She cuts it thinking to herself the hair will grow back so it's fine and not permanent. But the protagonist is more troublesome than she thought based on what she witnessed. If he keeps rampaging like that every time he gets upset, it's gonna be a problem for everyone around him. A maid knocks the door and calls Haley out with urgency in her voice. Haley says yes, and the maid turns around saying the madam is calling for her, so follow her immediately. Haley asks the madam is calling her with surprise and nervousness. The maid says it must be because she became Lord Jeremy's attendant and that's significant. Haley thinks to herself that to think she would step into the villain's stronghold right on the second day of possession. The maid tells her to remember this in front of the madam, do not argue needlessly about anything. Just say understood and nothing more than that. The door closes and Haley bows down saying madam with proper respect. She's Haley, the exclusive maid of Lord Jeremy assigned to his care. The madam tells her to come a little closer, she's too far away to talk properly and hear clearly. Haley thinks to herself that person is the marchioness, the woman she's heard about? The madam tells her does she understand why she's being called here today? Haley says she heard that it's because she became Lord Jeremy's attendant recently. The madam says in that case, she should understand her duties well, right, and what's expected of her. Haley nods and says yes, ma'am, with certainty and respect. The madam asks then why is it that her actions don't match her words and promises. According to the head chef, she took the medicine, saying she would add it to the tea herself instead. Haley realizes it and says she heard that Lord Jeremy often leaves his soup unfinished on his plate. Haley realizes that Jeremy was not the only one being watched, she was too by multiple people. Haley says that previously a doctor said that medicine is absorbed faster when taken with water rather than food. She got carried away by her desire to do things well and ended up overstepping her boundaries. She apologizes for her reckless actions that caused concern. Haley bows down and the madam says she sees with understanding. Such a diligent child who cares about her work. Haley thinks to herself, will she be able to get through this interrogation safely? There are no decent people in the Rosinante family from what she's observed. The Marquis's wife, who uses every possible means to exploit the kidnapped child for her own benefit. She intentionally made Jeremy sick with various substances, and secretly sold the medicine for his treatment, which contains sacred power given by the temple for profit. This was the Marquis's wife's specialty and source of income. Haley thinks to herself now that she thinks about it, her real son was a psychopath too according to the novel. The madam grabs her face and says how cute with false affection. Haley thinks to herself anyway, she needs to handle the psychopath in front of her first before anything else. The madam says her actions were rather cheeky, but she doesn't dislike a flexible child who can adapt. As she suggested from now on, put the medicine in the tea as instructed. But be careful next time not to deviate from orders. The madam grabs her arm and whispers to her that she wants her to work here for a long time without causing trouble. She hands her a bag and smiles, asking if she understands what she's saying right with hidden threats. Haley nervously says yes, my lady, leave it to me completely. The madam says that's good, she may go back now to her duties. The door shuts behind her and Haley sighs, thinking to herself her life is shortening with each encounter. She has been paid 2 days in a row, which is suspicious. A voice is heard saying, excuse me, he came to see his mother who should be inside. Haley gets startled and thinks to herself, mother, does that mean he is her son? She glances at him and thinks to herself, the eldest son of the Rosinante Marquis family without a doubt. Cecil Rosinante, the dangerous one she's read about. Cecil notices it seems there was someone else ahead of him in line. Haley bows down saying hello, young master, with forced politeness. Haley sobs to herself, thinking to herself what is going on one after another today. Cecil Rosinante, whose backstory she knows well. His father was obsessed with Jeremy and gives everything to him. He was ignored by his own family completely. Even the Marquis was too busy plotting, leaving him alone all the time without attention. He became a psychopath because he was never loved by his family members. And he places all the blame on Jeremy for stealing his father's affection. He is someone who would kill the heroine, the saintess, in pursuit of revenge against everyone. She really needs to be careful of this person above all others. Haley hides the money bag behind herself as she thinks to herself, if she makes one wrong move, she might actually die here. Cecil asks, is his mother inside the room right now? Haley bows down and says yes, she is inside meeting with someone. Cecil asks how is her mood today and what state of mind is she in. Haley thinks to herself, why is he asking her that specific question? It feels like anything she says is gonna get her killed in some way. Haley makes this image in her mind, saying that if she says she seemed to be in a good mood today, Cecil will say well then goodbye while holding a gun to her head, and if she says she doesn't seem to be in a very good mood right now, Cecil will say that's unfortunate so goodbye while holding the same gun with murderous intent. Haley looks down and says well but then saw a gun and gets startled. She starts panicking as Cecil says pardon with confusion. Could she say that again more clearly? Haley says actually she has night blindness, so she couldn't see properly in dim lighting. Cecil, all confused, says night blindness with genuine curiosity? Haley says it's a condition where she can't see well in dark places, and the room was dark when she entered. Because she was poor growing up, she couldn't eat many carrots when she was young, so she couldn't see the lady's expression clearly. Haley thinks to herself she doesn't even know what she's saying anymore in her panic. Cecil says if she doesn't eat carrots she can end up with such a condition, with interest. Haley says yes, please make sure to eat them, young master, for your health. Haley thinks to herself alright, this is her chance. She'll take this chance to quietly retreat from this dangerous situation. Haley drops the money bag accidentally. Cecil thinks to himself a maid is coming out of the Marquis's wife's room with money in a bag. And that room is a secret space where she invites men and enjoys late-night pleasures with them. This is something that should not be seen by anyone in the household. Cecil says Maid with suspicion. Is that what he thinks it is? Haley gets startled and says that's her salary for her hard work. She plans to eat a lot of carrots and cure this illness that plagues her. Please take care of her health as well, young master, she needs the nutrition. Haley runs out thinking to herself she hopes Cecil thinks of her as just a weirdo and nothing more. She hopes a disaster like a bullet embedding itself in her back doesn't happen today. Haley pants and thinks to herself thank goodness she escaped that encounter. The soldier says hey, Maid with amusement. Did she run away too from the young master? The soldier chuckles and asks what was that money for that she dropped. Haley says if he hadn't interrupted her forehead would have been fine and uninjured. The soldier says sorry that wasn't his intention to cause her harm. Haley asks how often does this happen with Jeremy's rampages? The soldier says he has never counted so he doesn't know, but probably about once every 10 days or so. Haley thinks to herself 10 days, that's pretty short interval between incidents. This is probably a clear sign. A sign that the beginning of the original story is approaching rapidly. Jeremy's power is heavily influenced by his mental strength. Despite this fact, the Marquis gradually starts to corner Jeremy more and more with his schemes. Ultimately, when Jeremy is consumed by his own power and loses control completely, the original story begins in earnest. Before that happens, she needs to get Jeremy out of here safely. Haley says well then she'll be going now to check on him. Haley calls out young master again and says it's her returning. Haley looks for him asking young master where are you? As she ties the curtains back to let light in, Haley asks if he's still resting from yesterday's incident. It's almost lunchtime, so it's time to wake up and eat something. Jeremy tells her to leave immediately. Haley was confused so she reaches out to him but then gets her hand slapped off roughly. Jeremy yells at her that he said not to come near him right now. Haley asks how is he feeling. Where is young master Jeremy hiding? Jeremy gets up and Jeremy says this maid seems to not even recognize her master anymore. Haley says young master Jeremy with shock. What on earth happened? Is he alright after yesterday? His face is red with fever? Should she call a doctor right away to examine him? Jeremy stays quiet and then tells her to just leave him alone. Haley says how with confusion? But she's supposed to care for him. Jeremy turns around and says he doesn't need a doctor who won't do anything helpful. And her as well. How can she calmly come here again after seeing something like that yesterday? It's a waste of time, so leave quickly before something happens. Haley says she won't leave him like this. Jeremy says what did she say with surprise? He's going out of his way to be considerate of her safety. Haley says she's the young master's personal maid assigned specifically to him. Even if he doesn't want her here, it's her job to stay and care for him. If he's worried about her getting hurt by a book flying at her, she'll dodge it better next time with improved reflexes. Jeremy looks at her and then looks down and says he remembers he refused her help. It was she who insisted on staying despite the danger. Haley says yes with determination. Haley sighs and thinks to herself thank goodness she wasn't kicked out. She thought she was going to be dismissed from her position. It'll be a problem if they keep having these confrontations every day going forward. Well, for now she'll just tidy up the room and make it livable. Haley cleans the room and thinks to herself alright, that should be enough for today's cleaning. She thinks to herself still once she starts, it's easy to see the end result. Then next is what? She wonders. She spots something and lifts a book while saying there was something she forgot to clean up here. What kind of book is this exactly? The book says he lost his memory after a strange incident. He met his father in the study yesterday, and when he woke up a whole day had passed without explanation. Haley turns the page and thinks to herself, lost his memory, that's concerning? It seems there was some misunderstanding. A doctor came, but he couldn't find any illness or injury. She has lost 3 days' worth of memories. Nothing seems to have changed, but she remembers nothing from that time. They said, if she stays quiet in her room, his father will come up with a solution to the problem. She did think it was strange and unusual. Despite having the power to destroy the world, why didn't she try to escape from this place? Jeremy trusted the Marquis, didn't he, despite everything that happened? By erasing memories with drugs, the Marquis was able to remain a father no matter what he did. Haley thinks to herself, once the drug wears off, Jeremy will learn the truth about everything. If he finds out it was her intention to help him remember, what will happen then? She puts the wet cloth on his head and sighs and thinks to herself, would he hate her for it? Jeremy opens his eyes, asking if she's still here watching over him. Haley says sorry. Did she wake him up from his rest? Haley asks how is he feeling right now. Is he hungry after sleeping so long? He had a fever, so she put a towel on his forehead to cool him down. Jeremy says, why didn't she run away when she had the chance? Haley asks, was she supposed to run away from him? Jeremy says she saw everything yesterday, right? The rampage and destruction? She must think he's a monster too, right? Just like everyone else does? Haley shakes her head and says, young master, there are all kinds of monsters in this world. But he doesn't fall into the category of a monster at all. Jeremy says, with confusion at her words. Haley says, besides, what happened yesterday wasn't intentional on his part. If anything, he was considerate not to drag her into it and hurt her. There's no such thing as a kind monster like that in this world, she knows. Jeremy blushes and changes his side and says, well, even if she flatters him like that, she has nothing to give him in return. Haley says, if there was something, could she have it as a reward? He really is kind, young master, more than he realizes. Jeremy blushes and asks himself what is with this maid who sees good in him. Haley hums a gentle melody and picks flowers from the garden with careful hands. Haley says him with delight. It smells so good, with the fresh fragrance filling her senses. Several days have passed since then, each one bringing small improvements to their situation. During that time, Jeremy returned to his childlike form, his body relaxing back into its innocent state. The room, which had been in disarray, returned to its original state of cleanliness and order. The young master's prickly demeanor also softened a bit, showing glimpses of the sweet child beneath. If things continue like this, they might be able to move forward smoothly without any major incidents. Haley thinks to herself with a smile that she has a good feeling about this new development. There's still a mountain of things to do, but they can deal with it gradually, one step at a time. A maid says, did she hear the latest news spreading through the palace? The saintess has gone missing without a trace. Haley turns her face and thinking to herself, what with shock and confusion? Haley asks, what with alarm? Who went missing from where? The only saintess of the Solastero Empire, Daisy, the angelic heroine of this novel she's living in. That heroine has gone missing under mysterious circumstances. Haley exclaims, how did she go missing, with genuine concern and worry? And the maids get startled by her sudden outburst. The maid says she doesn't know either the details of what happened. Anyway, the temple is in an uproar because of that unexpected disappearance. Since they sent the order down to the empire as well as the kingdom, she thinks they'll find her soon enough. Haley thinks to herself, there were no disappearance incidents in the original story she remembers. The maid says that's right, she should be safe. Someone like her can't just vanish. Haley thinks to herself, she can't imagine that quiet saintess disappearing on her own without reason. What on earth is happening to change the story she knows? Haley runs while sobbing, thinking to herself that she's late. She overthought things and stayed up too late last night. Haley, all panting, saying she's sorry, young master, for her tardiness. Jeremy says she's late, with disappointment in his voice. What time does she think it is right now? Haley says she's sorry with genuine regret. She'll be more careful from now on about punctuality. Jeremy sighs and Haley thinks to herself that his future girlfriend has gone missing from the world. Jeremy tells her to just drink some water and catch her breath first. Haley, all happy, thinks to herself, did Jeremy show concern for her well-being? Have they grown a little closer through their daily interactions? It feels like the stray cat she used to take care of has grown closer to her over time. Haley says she guesses she meant to stay by his side until marriage, young master. She'll serve him faithfully until then with complete dedication. Jeremy asks, what did she say, with confusion in his voice. Haley says she's talking about the future and what will happen eventually. She'll have to get married and leave this place when that time comes. Jeremy asks if she has someone on her mind already for marriage. Haley says despite how she looks, She's quite popular, you know, with confidence. Haley smiles and says she's quite the smooth talker when she wants to be. Haley asks, by the way, what's that he's working on so intently? He has been writing so diligently since earlier without stopping. Jeremy says homework with a tired sigh. Haley questions homework with surprise. She thinks to herself, is all of this massive pile homework for one person? Jeremy says, "I'll please stay quiet for a while if he doesn't finish this in time for the lesson." The door slams open and Haley gets startled. The teacher says, as usual, studying in such a small space like this. He drops his luggage and says, "My lord," with authority. Has he finished today's homework assignment that was given? Jeremy says he's sorry with shame. He only has one book left to finish completely. The teacher in anger says, "My lord, he should know the reason behind this lesson better than anyone else here. Even after his coming-of-age ceremony, he won't be able to marry anyone suitable. He's a flawed human being according to society's standards. The Solistero Empire has a strange law that governs unmarried nobles. Well, that's not such a big problem. That's why a tutor is here to help with education. In the Solistero Empire, if a young lord or lady completes their coming-of-age ceremony but does not marry within a certain time, they are considered incomplete as a person and are forced to take lessons continuously. The tutor says the problem lies in my lord's attitude toward his studies and responsibilities. While this may be the norm here, the tutor says he can't even remember the last time he completed all his homework properly. No matter what he teaches, he can't keep up with the demanding pace. Does he want him to report his negligence to the Marquis, who expects results? Haley thinks to herself, this is definitely going too far and is completely unfair treatment. Haley gets up saying, "My lord," with determination to defend him. She gets cut off by Jeremy saying, "Please give him a little more time to complete everything. He'll finish it today without fail. Please don't tell father about this delay." Haley looks at him with a sad look saying, "My lord," with sympathy for his situation. The tutor starts laughing and says how long should he continue to overlook this poor performance. But if that's what he says, as a teacher who supports their students' growth, he must grant his request this time. The tutor grabs more books and drops it saying here's more for him to complete. Please meet his expectations next time or face consequences. Jeremy's hands tremble as he says yes with fear and exhaustion. The teacher says, by the way, he sees a new face here in the room. It seems she has something she wishes to say, even though she's interrupting the lesson inappropriately. The tutor says what is it that she wants to express. Haley says she is trying to speak up. She gets cut off again by Jeremy saying he's sorry. It seems she has forgotten to prepare the tea for their guest. As he can see, she's a newcomer who's not used to the work here yet. Jeremy grabs her clothes while saying please don't mind the words of an ordinary maid who doesn't understand. Haley gets quiet and bows down saying as you say, young master, with reluctance. She apologizes for interrupting the lesson so rudely. The tutor says for a maid to not even know the basics of proper behavior. Please go quickly and don't return until called. Haley says thank you with forced politeness. She will prepare it immediately as requested. The scene cuts to Haley all pissed off thinking to herself, what does he mean by tea when she's so angry? He's wasting rainwater collected on the roof on something like that meaningless ritual. Just copying everything over and over. How is that even a lesson that teaches anything? Haley says Jeremy's hands looked hurt from all the excessive writing. She wonders if he's okay and not developing serious injuries. If she were the heroine, she would have been able to take care of that supporting character in an instant with her powers. All she can do is boil tea here like a useless servant. How pathetic and disappointing her situation has become. She hates her own incompetence and inability to help when it matters most. She pictures Jeremy holding her clothes, so Haley gets up thinking to herself she really can't just stay silent any longer about this injustice. In her imagination she's hurting the tutor and telling him to take this and this for his cruelty. She thinks to herself if she could she'd do it right now without hesitation. But then Jeremy would be in trouble, wouldn't he, with the Marquis? Haley adds something special in the tea and says to herself in that case she'll do what she can within her limited power. The tutor declares that when he was a student an hour was more than enough for him to complete such work. Jeremy apologizes and says he will finish it now. Haley approaches and hands him tea while Jeremy looks at her with curiosity. The tutor suddenly yells out demanding to know why Jeremy's hand is stopping and tells him to focus on his work. The tutor becomes startled by something and comments that it smells very nice. He wonders if it is rosehip tea and asks if that is correct. Haley confirms that yes, it is cherry rosehip tea and expresses that she is impressed he noticed so quickly. The tutor explains that well, he does have some knowledge about tea and its various types. Haley begins pouring the tea carefully and mentions that she has heard that nobles like the Baron enjoy tea of various kinds and appreciate different qualities. For example, she describes how this particular tea has a red color that is reminiscent of roses. She continues explaining that it has a sweet and refreshing aroma that spreads across the palate perfectly. She notes that there is a perfect balance of tartness from the rosehip and the sweetness of the cherry that dances on the tongue. Haley enthusiastically shares that she has heard that one can express tea like this using all three senses, which are sight, smell, and taste combined together. Haley smiles warmly and explains that she made sure to brew it in a way that would please the Baron and meet his refined tastes. Haley thinks to herself that honestly she just said all that off the cuff without really planning it beforehand. But she reflects that she indeed did add whatever she thought would improve the fragrance and color of the tea. The tutor responds with a thoughtful hum sound and says that if she can say that much about the tea, then for now the fragrance is acceptable to him. Haley thinks to herself that now he should drink it quickly before it gets cold. The tutor decides that then one sip would be appropriate to try. Haley thinks to herself that she knows he will not have time to actually savor it anyway since lessons must continue. A sip is almost taken by the tutor, but suddenly he jumps dramatically and drops the teacup while yelling out, asking what exactly she has served him. He declares that he does not know what to say about this situation and that he did not expect this at all. Jeremy quickly gets up from his seat saying teacher and asking him to wait. Jeremy gets cut off by Haley, who interrupts saying that she is terribly sorry, my lord, and expresses deep regret. She explains that she just wanted him to enjoy the tea's fragrance for a longer period of time. She declares that she never imagined it would turn out like this terrible situation. The teacher asks sternly if she thinks such an excuse is acceptable for what has happened. Haley responds by saying that to have heard his handsome mouth, my lord, means that she has committed a grave mistake that cannot be easily forgiven. The tutor gets silent for a moment and asks, really, with surprise in his voice. He reflects that to think that he has made a lady cry with his harsh words. He decides that he will let her off this time as a show of mercy, but in return she must not fall in love with him and asks if that is okay. Haley responds with gratitude, saying thank you very much, my lord, with relief in her voice. She thinks to herself, wondering if this person has ever looked in a mirror to see himself clearly. She turns around and looks at Jeremy with concern written all over her face. Haley smiles reassuringly at Jeremy while Jeremy thinks to himself, wondering what exactly she is so proud of in this situation. The tutor clears his throat loudly and announces that now they will begin the lesson in earnest without any more distractions. He addresses the maid, asking her to please clean up the young master's desk area. Haley responds that she understands the instruction perfectly. The tutor reaches into his belongings and hands Jeremy a small bottle while explaining that for now young master here is the medicine he needs to take. Haley thinks to herself with confusion about why there would be medication during a regular lesson. The tutor explains that as he mentioned during the last time they met, they will be extracting mana today from Jeremy. Haley becomes confused and thinks to herself that there is no way Jeremy can do that successfully. She knows that Jeremy is not a mage, so he does not have any mana to begin with naturally. Jeremy drinks the contents of the bottle as instructed, and the tutor tells him to reach out with his hand and try to materialize the mana energy. He instructs Jeremy to imagine the blood concentrating in his palm and forming into something solid. Jeremy looks at his hands nervously while trying to follow the instructions. The teacher yells out loudly that Jeremy's concentration is lacking significantly and asks if he should report his poor attitude to the Marquis. The tutor hits Jeremy's hand with a wooden stick and Jeremy cries out saying "Father" in pain. The tutor responds that if Jeremy does not want that punishment, then he must concentrate harder on the task. Jeremy looks down at the ground and trembles as he attempts to use his mana energy. Haley thinks to herself that this is definitely not real mana that Jeremy is producing. The tutor says all right and announces that next they will condense this mana into a solid form that can be handled. He instructs Jeremy to gather the scattered mana in one place and maintain it there steadily. The teacher begins saying a spell under his breath and snaps his finger with authority. The mana gets concentrated in Jeremy's hand through the teacher's magic. Haley thinks to herself about this magic circle that she is observing. She feels like she has seen it somewhere before in the past but cannot remember exactly where. Jeremy struggles in pain but manages to turn the energy into a solid form, and as he trembles from the effort he says that it is complete and that he has created a mana stone. Haley thinks to herself that until now, she thought that there was nothing she could do to help Jeremy in this situation. Thanks to witnessing this process, she has thought of something she might be able to do to assist. She decides that now is the time to act. The teacher yells at Jeremy saying that to think that he cannot even handle his own mana freely when he was supposed to be attending the academy for training. The tutor turns his head toward Haley and says yes while looking at her directly. Haley gets startled as she realizes that she was being watched and observed this entire time. The tutor says that since it is a good opportunity he will have some tea cakes, so please place them on the table there. Haley responds saying thank you very much Baron with politeness. The tutor suggests that they should take a little break from the intensive lesson. He tells Jeremy that he should focus on shaping the Mana Stone during this break time, young master. The tutor comments that at this rate he feels like even taking a break is a waste of valuable time, but decides to allow it anyway. The teacher moves to sit down in his chair but suddenly gets hit with something sharp and unexpected. He lets out a huge scream of pain and surprise while Jeremy keeps looking back and forth between the tutor and Haley with confusion. Haley winks at Jeremy playfully and gives him a thumbs up sign with her hand. Jeremy becomes scared and asks her not to tell him what he thinks might be happening. The tutor screams in pain and calls out to the maid demanding to know what is the meaning of this incident. He asks angrily why such a sharp and dangerous weapon was placed on his chair where he would sit. This time he declares that he will not let it slide or forgive this action. He demands that she explain herself properly right now without any excuses. Haley chuckles quietly to herself with satisfaction at her successful plan. Haley puts on a cute innocent expression and says "ah" with surprise in her voice. She wonders aloud how something like that sharp object ended up in that particular location. She claims that she does not really know herself how it got there. She suggests that could it be that it was somehow stuck in the chair already from before. She proposes that it must have fallen onto the chair because of the strong wind that was blowing through the room. She points out that it is so small and tiny that it is not surprising for it not to be noticed by anyone walking around. The teacher becomes very pissed off and frustrated by her obvious lies and lets out a huge scream of anger saying that a thumbtack being blown away by the wind is completely impossible and ridiculous. He declares angrily that between the tea incident earlier and now this thumbtack situation he has already overlooked enough of her suspicious and dangerous behavior. The teacher grabs the wooden stick tightly in his hand and points it directly at her threateningly while saying that if a noble person is injured without any reasonable cause, someone will definitely have to take full responsibility for the consequences. Unfortunately, that heavy responsibility and punishment will fall entirely on her shoulders as the servant. Haley thinks to herself that she must not be afraid of what is coming next. She tells herself to just close her eyes tightly and it should be over after receiving just a few painful hits from the stick. Jeremy suddenly yells out loudly at Gurna-sensei with urgency in his voice and says that it was actually something that he himself dropped while playing around carelessly, so if anyone has to be punished for this incident it should definitely be him and not the maid. Haley looks at him with shock and says young master with concern in her voice. She asks what exactly he is saying by taking the blame. Jeremy looks at her nervously and yells back at her that he does not remember giving her any permission to interfere in this matter between him and his tutor. Haley becomes sad and hurt by his harsh words directed at her. Jeremy continues by saying that he apologizes sincerely and that he did not expect the small thumbtack to fall on the tutor's chair like that. He insists that it is all his fault entirely and no one else should be blamed. Haley responds by saying no, that it is actually her fault for not cleaning up the room properly beforehand as she should have done. The tutor observes this exchange and says that to think that they are covering for each other so protectively like this. He admits that it is so moving and touching that he might actually cry from the emotion. But he asks sarcastically if she really thinks that he would listen to the opinions and words of a mere maidservant over what his young master has to say about the situation. The tutor drops his wooden stick to the ground and says that if Jeremy insists so much on taking responsibility, then he will do exactly as the young master wishes. He declares that this incident too shall be considered a mistake that requires punishment. The tutor raises his arm high up in the air to deliver a painful blow to Jeremy, and Jeremy closes his eyes tightly in fear and anticipation of the coming pain. Jeremy realizes that he did not get hit as expected, so he opens his eyes slowly in confusion and surprise. When he looks around, he sees that Haley has positioned herself to get hit instead of him and is now in pain. Jeremy yells out Haley's name with worry and shock in his voice. Haley responds that to have her name called out by the young master makes her feel honored despite the pain she is experiencing. Haley turns to face the Baron directly and tells him that she will definitely report this entire matter to the Marquis immediately. The tutor scoffs dismissively and asks what exactly she is talking about with such confidence. He claims that he has merely disciplined this rude maid appropriately for her behavior. Haley says firmly that is not what she meant by her threat at all.